our next session here. So welcome to those of you just joining, and again to those of you who've been with us on this journey so far. We're on day 2 of the Open Future Forum. Today's theme is around hunger, nutrition, food systems, regenerative ag, and we're only 2 sessions into the day, and it's just been so rich. I feel so emboldened and inspired by what we just heard with all these incredible demonstration projects around the world, and looking forward for that grounded root of the work happening on the ground and in systems change to feed into this next conversation, which is a session on funding from farm to table. It's going to be moderated by my co-founder, Katie Archambault, and Charlie Hopper from the Center for Regenerative Agriculture. And want to welcome all the panelists and guests who've just arrived. I do want to say a quick thank you to our co-conveners. This forum has been the little engine that could, a tremendous amount of work to convene and call these incredible stakeholders and community members and incredible practitioners, literally from around the world. Yesterday was it was an amazing expression of I think just seeing how connected really these webs are of our efforting, and today feels like it's set up to be that exact same intent, to just weave better webs of connection, see each other more clearly, and learn how we can better resource these incredible efforts happening in our own communities of place, but at a global scale. I'm excited to kick this session off, and I just want to thank the co-convening partnership that we've had from, in particular, American Sustainable Business Network, Bluefin Investment, the Eco Restoration Alliance, El Puente, our new partners, Global Unity, the Guild of Future Architects, our very near and dear partners as well, Heartland P5, which we'll be hearing from, Imagine World, Kirk, who was just here with us sharing about their work in Nourish Hawaii, the Institute of Ecotechnics, Intergen Family, Kinship Earth, the North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, which is here represented with Charlie and Katie, and I'm very excited about later in today, we'll be sharing the work of the Extension Center that we're launching. You can join in that design charrette. Partnerships for Change, Pro-Social World, Reconsider, Toxic Free Future for Our Children, Tringo Foundation, and United Refuge. So thank you to all of our co-conveners, our partners, our presenters, our contributors, to those of you here, and I'm going to hand that over to Katie to kick off this session. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Jamaica. I'd like to thank in particular our sponsor for today, which is North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. And I'm going to keep this opening brief. We have had a lot of conversations yesterday and into today around some of the challenges of resourcing some of our projects. And there have been a lot of threads around, well, what are the solutions? How do we resource? How do we resource in particular the transition to regenerative practice, for example? And one of the aims of today's session is to kick off a really specific conversation around that. And so I'm excited to welcome food and agricultural professionals all the way along the supply chain, truly from farm to table, to share some of their challenges and opportunities that they have found in resourcing their work. I'm going to hand it off to Charlie to get us kicked off for this session today. But I will name now, and I'll name this at the end of the session, that this is kind of an initial setup for a design charrette, as Jamaica mentioned, that we'll have later this afternoon as well, as we'll be leveraging some of these learnings to launch a Center for Regeneration with the aim of resourcing some of these efforts. So over to you, Charlie.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks, Jamaica, and thanks everybody who's been here. I know a lot of people are just bouncing in. I know we still have some people that said they were going to be here that are joining, and we'll have some join in the middle. So I'm going to round robin this a little bit. I have a schedule in my head, but not too much, and I don't want to bloviate too much either. My goal here was to introduce some folks. I've been, a lot of the farmers and the partners that I brought into this panel to talk today are folks that I've really gotten to know well over the last 12 years or so. Since I came back to Missouri from the mountains, and I've watched them grow communities, here, and infrastructures and places and people and grow a food system, and more than a food system. And I don't know that funding is the right word. I think everyone in here would say, what the hell's funding? We never see that. It's, but they're all people that have heart and mission and determination and have kept moving in their worlds and growing communities around them so that they could all collide, and that we find our points in times where we're able to do what we want to do, and we keep doing it. But I know they also have dreams and things they'd like to do and barriers that keep them from them. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting that exposed to see it. I've focused on 2 geographic areas and a little bit of outside, but I have a cluster of people that live around central Missouri, around Hartsburg in particular, but they're also connected throughout Missouri as they've helped grow kind of our organic circle around the state with the Missouri Organic Association and several other initiatives. And then I've got a cluster of urban folks here around Kansas City that have been growing farms and farmers for about the last 10, 15 years. And particularly one piece of property has been growing farmers for 30 years through various education forms. And it's neat to see how it goes. And then we have a couple other folks that I'm hoping will join. One is Dari from North Carolina A&T. He can tell you a little bit about the work they do there in Extension. For those of you in Missouri, you'll remember Sanjin Gu, our vegetable specialist years ago. Dari works with him. And that's how I've gotten connected with them. And I've been working pretty closely with them for 2 years. And we're hoping to get a visit from Chef Michael Foust, who started a restaurant here in Kansas City called Farmhouse, which is really kind of our first farm to table. And Alice Waters years ago had him as one of her 50 in the list, because what he really did was convened the marketplace and the people in every way around his tables to make us all better people. He also worked with me when I was with the state, training school lunch people around the state how to cut vegetables and really helping us overcome some of the barriers to get stuff back in. So I'm going to kind of round robin this. I haven't told anybody who's going first. If Dari is here, and I don't think he is yet, I wanted to get him out early, but I'm probably going to start with Dan. And just my background to Dan is someone who, Dan Kuebler, Salad Garden in Ashland, is someone who is kind of a leader in the movement. He was one of the first ones out there. We all look up to him and he's mentored a lot of us, but has also helped coalesce a lot of things. When we rolled the Missouri Farmers Market Association out of the state, he was right there on the committee and helped us get that on its own and turn it into a living being. He's a forerunner in the Missouri Organic Association and has championed a project, the Columbia Farmers Market, which was the #1 market in the country last year for decades. It's taken them to get this facility built and what it's become today. So I'll let him go, and I'll probably go to Lindsey next if Dari's not here.
Thanks, Charlie. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to this forum. I appreciate it very much. Gosh, there's so much to talk about, but I should probably keep it to no more than 10 minutes. Is that right?
You can go even shorter if you want. I've loaded this thing up.
Okay. I might do that.
I just want people to get to know each other. And, like I said, just what do you do? How'd you get there a little bit?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, where do you want to go next, and how can we get you there?
Okay. Well, it did take us a number of years to sort of get a permanent farmers market in Columbia, Missouri. We started in 1980 on the old fairgrounds under just a pavilion kind of thing, overhead, open-sided structure. That worked fine for about 11 years. And then the ground was sold because it was so close to town, it was being developed. And ultimately what happened, we got kicked off of that site and we got placed on a parking lot. I mean, we sort of were running for our lives. And real quickly, I happened to be on the board at that time. Real quickly, I looked around and said, we are in trouble, because we were on a black surface parking lot next to Interstate 70. And it was like no tents, no shade. There weren't pop-up tents back then. And so we began to kind of say, okay, we need a permanent home and we need a structure. That's where we started back in like 1992. And we worked in so many different ways through so many years, but ultimately what we did along the way is we really got vested in our community. We really proved to our community that we were there permanently to help supply food to this community. But we had to work hard at that. We had to talk to the city council. We had to talk to the county government. We had to talk to Parks and Recreation because ultimately this piece of property got purchased by the city and they built a recreational center on it. And we were hoping we'd be able to build our structure on it. And so we had to lobby real hard, our council people, but we did that. And so as time moved on, we built more trust with our community, but it really took a lot of energy to do it. And then probably we did a design charrette way back in probably 1998 or so. And we came up with plans. We had an architect. And for years and years, we kind of struggled. We developed Friends of the Farmers Market and Sustainable Farms and Communities, another not-for-profit. We just were trying all these different things to kind of move this project forward. We finally got off the ground in like 2008 with a little grant money locally. And then the recession hit. And it was just like, that was it. You know, there wasn't any more money. And so we kind of gave up for a number of years because it just wasn't there to be had. There wasn't any funding for our vision. What happened along the way, another group called the Columbia Center for Urban Ag developed in Columbia. And they had some real young, dynamic people that was involved in their organization. I think they even had someone who worked for the Kellogg Foundation who became their CEO. And they built their organization for a number of years just with the community. And eventually then we all worked together, the farmers market, sustainable farms and communities, the community at large, and we all worked together and we put a program together, raised the money, $6 million. And so we have this marvelous structure now, but it's all because we really got through the years, the entire community behind us. And that seemed to be the central thing. You know, way back then, when we had this early vision, I was like a lot of farmers. We got to do it all by ourselves, right? And it was like, it doesn't work that way. You can't do it by yourself. You've got to learn to work with your community and find ways to connect people and to see that big picture and for them to also trust that you really are serious about being there long term. And so that's the lesson that I kind of learned. You know, it took 20 years for the dream to come true. But boy, it sure felt good when I walked into that structure when it was being built, because it was exactly as we visioned it, basically 20 years before. So that's kind of my story.
So I'm gonna hit you one more time here, Dan. So that you do all this stuff for everybody all the time. You're out there. You are one of those super organizer connector guys. But you know, the time it took you to do that, at this point in your life, I know what your passion is, and it's kraut. It's it's growing.
Yeah, sauerkraut,
fermentation, and you are a farmer, And I would say at this point in your life, what is the most important thing that you need help with getting to the next phase of your life with your farm? Not for everybody else, but for your farm and the land that you've taken the responsibility for. And
well, that's a good question. You know, I have a little 30-acre farm, but we only grew our vegetables on like 1.5 acres. And we're transitioning. I grew hemp last year. I grew medical cannabis. I make my ferments, and we still have some vegetables. But I'm now 72 years old, and it's like, I don't want to do that anymore. But yet I want my property to continue to be a farm for the community. And one of the things we did execute a conservation easement this year on my property so that we can count on that farm being used as a farm and growing food for the community, hopefully in the long term. But I still haven't decided what's next. I think what's next on my farm might be I have to connect with some young farmers who don't have land and they want to work with me and maybe rent my property in some way or have a, you know, more of a community kind of farm. that's an unknown. I'd really like to explore that more. But that's probably the direction my farm is going in. So I need help. We need help on, I've never done that before. You know, it's like, who can help me? Who can help me figure out how the best use of my property is, knowing that I want it to stay a farm, but I don't want to be the farmer anymore.
Thank you, Dan. I've watched you struggle with that story for 12 years, which is why I asked.
Has it been that long?
I mean, Dan tried to basically, let someone work their way onto the farm 10 years ago, and I mean, I've seen so much progression in this and how it's gone. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go ahead and go to Lindsey next. And then after that, I'm going to go to Alicia. But Lindsey, is one of my dearest friends and the people I think the most of. We've shed a little blood at the Missouri Department of Agriculture together, trying to swim upstream against a lot of odds that didn't like the things we did necessarily. But I really appreciate her a lot. She was my farm to school director when I oversaw the stuff in business development, and we did charrettes all around the state, really getting some input into how to do things from all the farmers and the chefs out there. So I would trust her with any community I needed help with, because she's really good at it. But I'll let her tell you what.
I think we may have lost audio on you, Charlie.
Yeah, I think we lost audio for a second there, Charlie.
That's me. Can you
You're
hear me?
cutting in and out a bit.
I'll lose my headphones. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So did you hear any of it?
The first half, maybe. It was like
Okay,
the last
but anyway,
30 seconds.
Lindsey and I, we spent this time together through the Missouri Department of Agriculture. I'll let you tell you a little bit about herself, but she's also got a presence in Columbia and Ashland, and is extremely involved with the Missouri Organic Association, which has, I'll let her tell you the numbers. I don't know what it is these days, but hundreds of farmers here in the state who've been trailblazing for a good long time at getting us toward regeneration.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie, and thank you for having me. Yeah, I know quite a few people on here. Hello, everybody. So I worked with Charlie back in 2014 for several years, and we've been connected ever since. I grew up on a farm, so farming has kind of been my livelihood since I can remember, and studied food science and nutrition, have been on many boards of agricultural nonprofits, and currently I'll go on the MOA rant. Missouri Organic Association, I've been on their board for 4 or 5 years, and I think the reason I'm here today is to share that Missouri Organic Association is developing into something that it's never been, and that's where we need help. I am not a farmer. I do organic farm inspections for a living, but as a nonprofit board member, I think it's the most important to help keep that nonprofit going. And I think that farming isn't going away as long as we can help people be able to keep doing it. If they're not getting paid, they're not going to farm. And I think that's a huge problem, the economics of it. But Missouri Organic Association was gifted these incredible historic buildings. And can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And so there are these incredible event spaces, and we definitely need help figuring out how to keep those running and, full of educational opportunities. And they have commercial processing facilities, and, opening those to the community in a way that's going to be helpful. And, this whole education aspect, and trainings and all of these things. So for me, that was definitely what I wanted to say to everyone here, is that, you know, that kind of element is I think the most important whenever it comes to making sure that farmers are taken care of and communities are aware that the struggle is the most intense, I think, you know, for a farmer. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say.
I mean, I think a lot of people know the farmer struggle, and on the association side, you know, it seems to me the building and the place has started to ground MOA in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to COVID and the gathering or the happening of that building, which is what it's kind of become, and that town has always been one, but the association lived or died by the conference.
Yeah.
You know, and could you get hundreds of people into a hotel to pay enough bills to, you know, I mean, and just the minutia we were all going through, it feels like, to keep such things alive. But it was so important that we all connected, and so important that we did things like we're doing here today. But just, it seemed like, you know, the association lived for the hotel contract sometimes, not not the farmer. And what do you see that, you know, in this transition of having that building there and just new connectivity like this, the fact that we could all connect, what do you see as, you know, the future in that? You know, do you see a transition in how MOA operates starting to occur? And, you know,
I
identity?
think absolutely, Charlie. And I know, Dan, you can speak to this, and Emily, quite frankly, you can too, a bit, I would say. So, you know, just since we've had the buildings, we've for sure been able to support more events and more educational opportunities. And, you know, we're able to support farmers in kind of a different way, right? If they need a gathering spot to, you know, even have a family reunion, right? I mean, this is a community place. So it's really, I think, open the door for MOA to expand their vision and their opportunities to reach not only farmers, but the community in a way that allows us to, you know, share our mission and this whole idea of organic farming and regenerative agriculture and sustainability. And, you know, the town that we're in is completely commercial farming out there. Not completely, but, you know, a lot of it is, they definitely don't have necessarily a good taste in their mouth when they hear organic. So, you know, it's been a challenge, and I think it's just all about making sure you're communicating and sharing what our mission is, and that, you know, this is about education, and let's try to learn something together, right?
Yeah,
So
if I can, I'll add also, Lindsey, that this is the first year we're actually going to be able to have our conference. We have a yearly conference. This is the first time we're going to be able to have it outside of a hotel, because we're going to do it down at Hartsburg at our two beautiful buildings and across the street at the American Legion. And we have a number of great speakers lined up, all in the realm of what we've been talking about here with regeneration and organic principles. And so we're really looking forward to it, because it's going to be much more sort of like inviting people into your house to have a conversation, because these buildings are just so unique. And the big one's been around since 1897. And we're really looking forward to that. I really feel that we can make some new connections there. We are, as Lindsey said, right down in the river bottoms. I mean, this building has flooded in the Great Flood of '93. It flooded big time. We're right in the Katy Trail. And so we have the potential to really impact a lot of different people who are coming through this community, and especially when we have our conferences and field days and seminars that we will continue to invest in and put on down there.
Awesome. I'm going to go to Lindsey. I got one more question for you, Lindsey. It's a little off this topic, but you're out there with the organic farmers doing these certifications every day. And just for a lot of folks on here, we've got a lot more people confirmed. About half of them have showed up, but the last 2 nights in Kansas City, and I really thank you, Alicia, for being here, and you too, Emily, because I know you both, we had 28 and 27 degrees here the last 2 nights, and these were our first hard freezes. So, you know, a lot of these folks are out there trying to save what they can for their income for the next 3 months. So it's a real time for us here. So, and it's real for them every day. So back to that question for you, Lindsey, just this last thing. Are you hearing any common needs, threads, tools, you know, from the farmers you're talking to with the organic certification, whether they're the grain farmers or whether they're whatever, with just the support transition on the financial side around carbon credits or whatever? Is there any tool that you're hearing a need for from these on a
you know,
regular basis?
yeah, as I think and I don't know exactly what kind of tool this is, but a farmer needs to be able to be a farmer and not an accountant and not a record keeper and nada, you know? And they're just not able to do that whenever all of these things are required. So
That's perfect.
yeah, I mean, that's it. I don't know.
You don't need to say anything else. I'm gonna bounce out of Hartsburg into Kansas City, Kansas for a minute with Alicia, and then we're gonna go back to Hartsburg with Emily, and then see who else shows up. I had a couple that were coming midstream, so. Go ahead, Alicia. Oh, Alicia runs Kansas City Farm School at Gibbs Road. I had mentioned this in the intro to the session. It's the property that for 30 years, all these different organizations have grown out of, from Cultivate to New Roots Forever. I mean, we've got so many wonderful organizations in this town. Just to give you a sense of Kansas City's urban ag scene, our Kansas City Community Gardens Club or Association is really what it is. It has over 350 school gardens with education programs in the schools that are active every day. 350. It's an amazing footprint. They have over 3,000 members that get either seed support or people coming out to till their yard or come in and for education and things. So it's pretty deeply rooted and granulated, and the movement here has been going on a long time. And it's just amazing what's there. But Alicia's been here and really has a good representation of that whole community, because I think she's been involved with almost all the organizations over the years. And now, as all of us know, we all just are temporary stewards of our land. And she's taken that role now with KC Farm School at Gibbs Road and really doing the same kind of soil growing that the rest of these people are in their community. So go ahead, Alicia. I'll shut up.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlie. It's good to be here. It's true. We work together. So the group that Charlie was just describing, Kansas City Community Gardens, they're on the east side of town. And we're on the west side of town, 2 different states even. And still we know each other, we work together, support each other. There are many collaborations reaching many different pieces of the community. A little bit about KC Farm School. We do sit on historic farmland. Going back 30 years, we know the people, we still work with the people who have worked there. So Catherine Kelly, we give her a lot of credit in Kansas City for founding Kansas City Center for Urban Agriculture that became Cultivate KC. She and Daniel DeMitzel started that back in the mid-2005. I came to Kansas City to run that farm for Catherine, for Daniel. So I was the farm manager at Gibbs Road for 6 years. And in 2009, when I came to town, the work that Charlie had been doing, the work that many people had been doing over the years, it really felt like arms linking, like people were waiting for me at the city gate, like, okay, great, you're here, now let's get going, let's keep going. There was a big flow of movement that spurred a lot of different farmers and community organizations and has really pulled together over the last many years. We also know that where we are in the country, we're at the western edge of the Hopewell Exchange, that 2,000 years ago, people were here growing food. So we talk about the last 30 years, we know the people's names, but we also know that the Delaware people were farming, were living in this part of the country 150 years ago, and then even 2,000 years ago, people were growing food on the edges of forest and managing the plains with the buffalo. So a lot of collaborations have happened, and in this newest version of Gibbs Road Farm, a 3-acre farm in Kansas City, Kansas, and Wyandotte County, the most richly diverse county in the state and the second most diverse county in the country. We are rich in culture and language and opportunity. We also find ourselves very poor in health and one of the lowest income county in the state. So sitting in this county, we've dedicated the mission of KC Farm School at Gibbs Road to bring people of all ages, ancestries, and abilities on farm hands-on. We really want to connect people to land, soil, food, community, and opportunity. And we do that with on-farm market every Wednesday. So market's going to start in a couple hours here. All of our education programs from 0 to 100 are free or pay what you're able. So our food and our education is all pay what you're able. A lot of farmers have grown out of out of the land that's now KC Farm School. The Growing Growers program has been doing for many years an awful lot to grow up the next generation of farmers. The Young Farmers Coalition right now is gaining power and organizing and gaining strength and amplifying the voice. Build Tribe is an example of a nonprofit that takes care of young people who are not in their original homes, not in their biological homes, and then provides skills training. So Build Tribe teaches farming while they're teaching culinary and business and construction. Boys Grow is another farming operation that's teaching the youth in Kansas City on the other side of town. KC Food Circle gets a lot of credit for pulling us together 30 years ago with Craig Volan's work, and then people carried on that work over the years. And then a lot of social enterprises, but then also the Kansas City Food Hub, which formed about 10 years ago, is now a collaboration of about 25 growers. Maybe 5 or 6 of us are in the city, but the majority of those folks are on 10 to 200 acres out about 100 miles from the city center. So we're seeing a big, especially with Katie Nixon's work from West Central Missouri Action Agency, pulling a lot of urban and rural folks together. And Wichita, the same way, right? A lot of stuff going on over there.
So I know that you guys have a lot going on over there, and you are probably the most organic grower of people I know. It is to come and give as you can. I mean, of all the organizations I've seen, but I know you have some stuff you're needing to tackle. You have another 11 acres that you just acquired next door, and you're going through a discernment process with, and what do you want to do with it, and how do you do it, and you want to do it in a meaningful way. You have programs you're trying to get out, and you just I just saw you talking about it the other day. You're in grant season. You're in 3 months of, well, what do I get to do this year, and asking permission. What can help you trip the switch and really allow that farm to.
Thanks for asking. Yeah, so we do have 11 acres. We're a young organization, just finishing up our 4th year. And so everything feels new and young, even though we come with experience to it. So I would give that a little bit of credit that my co-founder, Jennifer Thomas, is a high school teacher, has been for the last 17 years in the district. I've been farming for years. So we bring all this experience, both in education and in farming. But what Dan has said, what Lindsey has said, as we grow the next generation of farmers, they do have to have a place to go. We often hear someone has 5 acres, and then we also meet a farmer who wants to grow, and bringing them together, I think, is part of the solution, or maybe, is the solution that we need right now. On our 11 acres, we call it common ground. We host events, and we will be developing it out after this year of master planning for it. But I think having the confidence to ask a question that may seem too simple, right? Or trusting what's pulling our heart in a particular direction. I think so. Even though there are big needs that we all need, I think just learning to trust where our feet are walking and where we are in this life and filling that role. So our farm director is a young farmer. She's president of the Young Farmer Coalition in Kansas City, and she talks a lot about the need for prairie restoration. And not enough people know yet about prairie management or growing native plants, even though we have some awesome folks in town who know a lot. There's only a couple of them, and they're way overworked and in big demand. We need to understand more broadly where we are here in the center of the country. I mean, the prairie is one of the most endangered ecosystems in the world, and it's one of the best at carbon sequestration. And so we need to make sure we can learn more about that and teach people more about that. Of course, equity, both in access to food and access to opportunity. So those are big picture things, Charlie. K-State just did a research study last year, and they asked 100 farmers in the area what is most missing in their for them, and majority of them said business planning. So even though we have these really great hands-on training programs, we could do better with teaching farmers the business side. And then, I mean, when we talk about support for farmers, farmer mental health is at an all-time low, and we know that suicide rates among farmers is the largest in the country, and that's something that needs. And so let me add one more thing, and we need support for the coalitions that are already happening, the people who are already doing the work. So for instance, I just have to celebrate a minute. We just learned that we were awarded the USDA Farmers Market Promotion Program, just learned that today. And our plan is to work with the other 3 farmers markets in Wyandotte County and form a coalition that will do joint branding, joint promotion, build workshops together so that we will be able to amplify our voice that direction.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm going to just comment a little bit more on the farmers market thing. These folks all know when I worked for the State Department of Agriculture, that's really how I got to know everybody. The first thing I did was I went to every farmers market in the state over a period of 2 years. At the time, we only had 150. By the time we had gotten to the 3rd year, we had over 300 farmers markets. And it was for a lot of different reasons, but one of them was a high tunnel program we had that flooded the market with produce, and then suddenly we needed more markets, and then suddenly we went from 4 to 40 state inspected meat plants. I mean, there was just this, we really had, and these people were all part of making that happen. It's at this stage in my life, I go to KCK to the farmers market. I got some amazing, beautiful farmers markets all around me, but I go downtown to KCK farmers market, and it's at that stage. It's at a food co-op grocery store where it's still under-resourced. It still doesn't have the traffic or the supply it needs. And the market's got 3 vendors, you know, but one of them's KC Farm School. And I know you're particularly your farm managers and insistent upon showing up because she knows the importance of her being there at that stage. And this is a bit of a transition to Emily, because I can remember Emily and Paul being that farmer at the Lincoln Farmers Market when it was getting off the ground, and Dan being one of those farmers. But you got to have that one farmer that has enough to feed people and it has the right things to feed people for these markets to get off the ground. And then they can grow to the 300 vendors that Dan has at Columbian. But it takes someone willing to sweat it out for a few years. And thank you for what you're doing. And Emily, I'm going to transition to you. And I hear you have some other work you're doing in a land trust that I haven't heard about, but I would love to hear about. So, but Emily is a vegetable farmer, and her Paul, her partner, wonderful growers, and I used to live off their produce.
Yeah, and we definitely had enough that first year we were farming. So I grew up in rural Missouri, but left for college and various professions elsewhere and came back to Missouri in 2015, which was our first year as Three Creeks Farm. And that first year, we actually operated almost entirely off of a research grant that was meant to demonstrate how to transition commodity cropland in the Missouri River bottoms to diversified vegetable production. So it was a 4-person collective, and we got in way over our heads immediately with 6 acres of this little corner carved out outside of Jefferson City. But it was a SARE research grant, and we were basically trying to create enterprise budgets for each crop that we were growing. So we did potatoes, sweet potatoes, watermelons, black beans, and butternut squash. And there were all kinds of challenges that year, but luckily the research grant did pay a little bit for our labor in that, and we were able to come up with basically whether or not those crops met a living wage at the time. And most of them didn't come anywhere close. Some of them didn't even break minimum wage, but we did. Watermelons were a promising one. But anyway, that first year we ended up with, 9,000 pounds of sweet potatoes. So we were trucking stuff to St. Louis, going to multiple farmers markets. But we ended up really establishing relationships with local restaurants in Columbia, Missouri. And that wholesale approach was really appealing. It felt like it could be the cornerstone of our farm moving forward. So our 2 partners quit farming. Paul and I stuck with it. We scaled back from 6 acres to a single acre, and really diversified our crops. So I was going to try to, weave into this story how funding played a role, because we started from zero, other than that it was like a $12,000 research grant. And we looked at grants over the years to sort of build infrastructure. So we did the NRCS EQIP high tunnel grants. We did, at the time, the state had urban and non-traditional grants, which are now just urban. Unfortunately, we no longer can apply for those because we're outside of a major urban area. We're kind of in the River Hills, just north of Hartsburg. So we got some of those to launch a flower side of our operation. We do vegetables, flowers, herbs, and some wild edibles and mushrooms. And we also, through NRCS EQIP, ended up with agroforestry funding, where we planted hedgerows of elderberries, raspberries. We planted some things for the floral side, like baptisia and 9-bark. We got that grant again for our current location, which is a permanent spot that we moved to in 2020. And we're planting about 250 different trees and shrubs for harvest and habitat, is usually how I say it. But our biggest challenge really was we were hopping around from the bottomlands to a ridge location to another small bottomland area that ended up being overrun with Johnson grass. Dan was kind enough to let us use some of his tunnels for a year, and we just didn't have a permanent spot, but it was incredibly challenging for us to get access to financing to purchase a farm, because we were just building at that time. We've now reached a level in our 8th season where I feel like a bank would say, sure, we can loan on this model, but in those early years, there wasn't a chance. And the FSA program for farm ownership is a really long process, and you have to kind of have an agreement from the landowner to walk through that process with you for up to 90 days. And every time something became available that we wanted to attempt to purchase, no one was willing to wait 3 months for that process to sort of come to fruition. And so people with cash were just buying all of the farmland adjacent to our, at the time, farm. And it wasn't until 2020 when someone whose property was not on the market came to us, said, I want you to buy my property. That was the first step. And then we ended up finding a private investor to say, I will purchase this, and then I'll finance the purchase, and then you can pay me back over time. So that's how we ended up eventually with land, but it took 6 years for that to come through, and that really was a product of having built community over those years, because that opportunity, it's completely a blessing, but also, it seems impossible still that it worked out. But luckily it did. So one of the things that I am working on and have been working on since I came back to Missouri is sort of helping other beginning farmers find access to land. And one of the ways that I see that happening is through collaboration with local and regional land trusts. So I joined the board of the Greenbelt Land Trust here in mid-Missouri, and we agreed that we would sort of turn a little bit of a lens toward working lands rather than just traditional conservation. So specifically looking at keeping farms that are adjacent or in close proximity to the Columbia Urban Center, protecting them and keeping them in production. And so Dan was, our first he was our guinea pig, our model for protecting farmland for future generations. And the reason that also helps promote access is because it's basically either a donation or in some cases, a purchase of the development rights for that land. So, our land values around where Dan and I are, they're soaring into $25,000 an acre, right? But if you take away the right to subdivide and put housing development on it, it brings those prices back into hopefully what would be maybe an affordable range for someone looking to purchase land to farm. So that's all sort of in parallel work moving forward. And, one of the needs that we identified through Greenbelt was every other state, for the most part, in the nation has a land linking program where people with land can get linked up with beginning or existing farmers looking for property to farm or expand. And Missouri doesn't have that. We partnered with a graduate student at the university to sort of do a needs assessment there. And we have this hope to build this platform for the state of Missouri. And I've put in a couple of different grants. They never quite fit into the programs out there. We have partners lined up to do the build and the design, and it's just been hard for me to find funding to get that put together and launched. And then other things that we're seeing sort of in our region, there's a farm in a similar size to Dan's that's also been in production for not quite as long, maybe just a decade and a half or so, where the farmers they're retiring this year. And we started the conversation too late because they desperately want to keep their land as a farm as well. But that process takes, it would take a long time to either do the community fundraising to purchase it as a farm to keep in the community, or to do the agricultural conservation easement program through the USDA, even though I've confirmed that it's an ideal candidate for that. It would take a time longer than they have because they need to transition away from that and into a new home in a different town. And so it's those missed opportunities because of the sort of existing timeline of funding opportunities is usually way stretched out beyond sort of the immediacy of some of the projects that we would like to see happen around here and elsewhere. And so, yeah, that's a big challenge for some of the stuff that we're attempting to do. And then, the last thing that really comes to mind when I think about these topics and issues is that, we've, as a farm, we've reached our capacity at our new spot. We're growing as much as we can. Well, we're not even close to meeting the demand for wholesale markets in Columbia, let alone beyond. We're just selling out all the time, and we're doing hundreds of pounds of lettuce a week and all of this produce, but there are opportunities to sort of build that capacity and really infuse the local food system with even more locally grown produce, but we don't have the space or the human capacity to get that done. You know, we have a 3-member crew that comes twice a week, and that's basically sort of the limit of what we can afford. And then we're constrained by the space. There's just so much opportunity that is being missed because we don't have the capacity right now to sort of build and meet the demand. Hopefully that wasn't all over the place.
No, it was really good. And it was, you know, it's the real deal. Just imagine how nice your soil would be if it had been in one place for 6 years. You know, how many less weeds you'd have to deal with. And, you know, I mean, there's so much to that. It was just
getting good at the first spot when we moved. Yeah.
I gotta just, you know, I hate to ask a number, but it almost is. But you know, you stack grant after grant after grant after grant after grant. You know, how much would it have taken up front for you guys to get out the door and do what you wanted to do? I mean, if you're one of the most overeducated farmers I know. Number one, and you're very humbly sitting there with it. I mean, you know how to do the business case on this, and you know it's what does a farmer need to what size operation in your mind in a mid-mo farm that wants to be a wholesaler, that 10 to 25 acre farm or whatever it is that can provide them a living wage? What kind of a package, you know, do you think they could handle to be able to go do that if they could get the land? You know, and that's another issue because, you know, the land is hard and you have the development pressure. But and then I have one other question, and it's just because you're dealing with the land trust side of this as well. And it's, you know, one of the things I've run into a lot is the disparity between the production and the conservation land. You know, in mid-Missouri especially, you know, farmland's getting up to $10,000 an acre in northern Missouri. But, you know, if you went to the bank and you wanted to fund a holistic farm that had conservation and production land and only farm a small portion of it, you're only getting $1,500 an acre for that conservation land. The trees putting the carbon in the ground, and these little carbon credits they're sprinkling out isn't going to make that gap. It's not near it. You know, it's what if someone valued conservation and production land the same, would you farm differently? And how much, you know, what's your opinion on that? I just feel that's a thing we've got to figure out how to do, how to fund whole farms like we do whole people, you know. I mean, that concept of blending it all into one. FCS doesn't care about anything but what they can guarantee with crop insurance. You haven't had crop insurance to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess if you were starting, for the first question, if you were starting from bare ground with zero infrastructure, you know, you're looking at a well, a wash pack facility, ideally some tunnels for mitigating risk, especially with the, you know, weather we've been having lately. We don't farm with a tractor. I see, you know, we consider it sort of a low impact system. I mean, we have a 2-wheel walk behind tractor, but really, I mean, it's in a system like ours, you don't need 10 acres. You can, 1 or 2 people can make, you know, a decent living off of a single acre. I think we're on target this year to hit about 80 grand from a single acre. And so it's a sort of a model for, you know, I always recommend that people start really small, and if they want to expand later, they can take that for like a 1 acre market garden production system, say 15 for the well, you could do a pretty decent wash pack for about 10 grand probably, and then another 10 in, well, another 5 to 10 in equipment, if you, depending on what model you were using. 50, 30 to 40 plus the tunnels. Ideally you get an equip grant for those, especially if you're just starting out. But there's, you know, they have a system of ranking that sometimes favors land that has been in production for several years already. So I don't know, around 50K probably. The interesting thing about Missouri, and I don't know if this is nationwide, but they recently took the cap off of what you can apply for the high tunnels. So you could theoretically apply to cover your entire acreage in tunnels, but I don't know whether how that would work out if you were competing with someone who was asking for less funding. So yeah, somewhere around there. And then for the conservation / ag land, ideally we're not drawing a hard line between those. Like, one of the reasons that I wanted to come back to Missouri and the Midwest is because I see so much opportunity. We know we have the most productive lands in the nation. And a lot of that carbon that, is in the atmosphere has come from, the tilling of the Great Plains. We're releasing carbon from the soils into the atmosphere just as much as we are from, well, I don't know about just as much, but similarly to from burning fossil fuels. So I think that you can have agricultural systems that are sequestering carbon at a significant rate, as well as, keeping the trees or keeping the forests. And, when I was in grad school, the research was still out on that because we didn't have a system that was dependable for tracking sequestration of carbon in soils. There are so many factors in play, tillage and microbial activity and weather. It's a very complex system, but I think about the landscape sort of as a whole. And if you're building diverse and resilient ecosystems, then you're going to have a net positive effect over time. So my main argument is typically for the diversification of landscapes, and including, we're seeing a lot of research coming out of the Center for Agroforestry around being able to also make a living on the land off of perennial and more diverse cropping systems, including, planting strips between the commodity fields and the streams, and then you're having multiple benefits from systems like that. So yeah, I guess in terms of valuing that land, I'm not sure what the best approach is there. I've in that education that you mentioned, Charlie, I was always really I struggled with the way that investments and entities like hedge funds were driving land changes on a global scale. It was really hard for me to wrap my mind around how we were modeling those economically and then making promises about the value in different ways. So that's still something that I struggle with in terms of like the
You just want to
the dollar value of those things. I mean, I do think about it frequently, but I see that people, if we fund the people who are the good stewards of the land, then we will be having that positive impact.
All right, I got one more farmer that just joined us, and then I'm going to hit Dari, and then we're going to hit a couple other people who have some solutions on the table too. So I want to move pretty quick here. And Nelson Sousa, I just saw you in the back there. Are you still here?
Yes, I am. I'm here. Sorry, I'm out in the field, but I'm here.
That's all right. So do you have I just lost you. You moved. You must have turned your video on.
I did.
All right, so Nelson is the farm manager with Boys Grow. It's another local farm here that is focused on youth and growing farmers. And they've been doing some culinary stuff as well as farming. I'll let him tell you the story. I know he's got to run too because he's got a class coming in. And I want to get Dari a chance to say a couple words. And then I got a couple funders I want to get to. So
I appreciate it. Yeah. So Boys Grow really is, we're in Kansas City, and we teach young men how to be stewards of the land and how to grow and produce, and also really at the end of the day, to be completely honest, it's really growing young men into productive men in society, and emphasizing the agriculture and where we need the focus on in all the aspects of farming. We typically see about 40 students that come through. It's a 2-year program. It is paid. It is a paid program. They do work on soft skills and really, there's a lot to be said when we put people and put them in the fields, give them a day of hard work, and they're able to come out of it and see the fruits of their labors and the effects that they have, and how we adjust our products, our crops, and how we can provide and work as a team, and how we become dependent. So when the boys get here, they have really 3 areas they can focus on the farm: agriculture, mechanics, and culinary. So they kind of go into their own little division of where they have the best interest, and then we just expand on their knowledge and their growth.
All right. I mean, you're new there, so you don't have too much to share in terms of the struggle of getting there. But I mean, you guys have been at it for what? It's almost 15 years now. I mean,
Yeah,
close. Yeah.
It does flow, and really the reward with us is seeing, the kids come back and seeing their journey and what they've done and how they've been productive. It is kind of like a fraternity almost, there's a brotherhood of that they rely on each other, and they continue to network after boys grow. And after, once they finish that 2-year program here, they're not allowed to come back so much to like work or be, staff members. They have to have 2 years on their own, and go figure out the world a little bit. And then, we do have a lot of that do come back as returning staff that mentor the younger generations that come through. So,
awesome. Thanks for giving us your time. I know you're tight and have another class coming in. So
yes, sir. I appreciate it.
I'm going to bounce over to Dari here. Dari is with NCA&T, who's of course helped sponsor a lot of this, but also who we're partnering on with the Center for Regeneration, and works with Mark Blevins there, who's been our real point person. And Dari, you just want to tell us just a little bit about it? We're going to share more about you later in the video, so you don't have to talk too long. I just wanted to welcome you more than anything. And thank you for popping in.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Kathleen. Sorry for being late because I had another proposal meeting. I'm late. Yes, Mark's supposed to be here. Mark Blevins is our assistant dean of extension, and he has some other time commitment issues. So I'm here presenting. My name is Biswanath Dari. That is the last name, but I go by Dari. I am an agriculture natural resource specialist with Cooperative Extension. I do provide technical assistance to the small scale, limited resource, minority, underserved, underrepresented farmer in the states of North Carolina and other southeastern region. Do a lot of application-based research in our university farm, and then provide those information to the farmer. Get a lot of phone call, but we do not want to be the one-man army. And I might not know most of you in the thing in the Zoom call, but I really would like to get to know you guys and work as a workforce to help those small scale underserved farmers who are lacking so many resources, specifically under the current situation when USDA is really pushing through, and like from the farm to the table, the food. So we are in the same mission. Happy to work with you in the coalitions and the collaborations and get to know more about you. I will stop here, Charlie. If we get chance, then I will talk more about.
We're going to dig into you all a little more later. I just want to point, how many farmers do you work with? I mean, it's across the state, and I want to point out that they are the largest HBCU in the country, #1 HBCU, and we're proud to work with them. But one of the things that I think they share with everybody is, they serve a very large population that is extremely far apart. Just like in Missouri, where Lincoln only covers a few counties in the poorest areas, and then there's all the service in the middle. They have the same issue out there in North Carolina, and it can be 16 hours from one farm to another. So they're doing it with, where that's one of the reasons we have the partnership brew, and we do. So how many farmers do you serve? And just
yes, if I say the number, that would be undermining, but we do serve in over like all the 100 counties. We do have specialized agent who are rooted into different counties. But yes, in our area, we do serve all the 100 counties. I do not want to put a number there. So it's any farmer can call us. Specifically, we are focused on the small scale farmer because 89% farm the small scale farm, right, in the North Carolina, but we do receive call from other farmers too. So that's the thing.
Goes beyond numbers, but they hit over 15,000 a year.
Yes.
So it gives you a sense of.
Thank you, Charlie. It's better you say it than I say.
People.
Yes, it's better you say it than I say. Thank you.
All right, and I'm going to hop over to Bill next, and then Arno. So Bill Stoddart, I'll let you tell a little bit more. You're working with farms and some innovative finance solutions. You got both ends of it. And I know Reggie, by the way. I just wanted to say that. I've had the pleasure to meet Reggie early on.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks, Charlie, and thanks everybody for putting on this forum and the opportunity to share a little bit about the organization I'm with now. My background's in kind of innovative finance from kind of the advisor and private capital side. And about 2 months into a new role with Iroquois Valley Farms. Some of you may know Iroquois Valley. It's been around for about 15 years. The name comes from the location where it was started, just south of Chicago. We are not native, although, we love to believe that we're embodying to some degree principles of self-determination and long-term land stewardship and commitment. What we do is provide mortgages and leases to organic farmers. Really, our focus has always been farmers first. We do live between the reality of the fact that farming is really difficult and can be, challenging financially on a lot of fronts. And there's a lot more support that needs to be, that we need to kind of come to the table with as we grow and learn more about how we can be really good participants and partners in community. And we also have, the private investment reality where our funding comes from, which, has some demands for return. We are, proudly on the low end of that spectrum, provide a small dividend to investors. But, I've heard a little bit about land access. Certainly would love to, figure out if we can be good partners for some of the folks who are sharing those struggles and concerns. And, again, as we kind of continue on our learning journey about how we really can be the best community partners we can, whether that's, looking at conservation as part of it, looking at, supporting some of the sort of non-farm activities, accounting, business, marketing, some of those things, or other ways that we can really support farmers. That's really what we're all about. And just, feel that if we're going to solve for these solutions, it's got to be on the ground and it's got to be putting farmers first. So I'll pause there just because, we've got not a lot of time and I know there's others who want to share too. So thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for, I like I said, I met Reggie once. We were up in Fairfield, Iowa. We spent a day together with John Eichert and some really cool people having some really close conversations. And at that phase, I could see his vision and I could see what he was trying to do. But when I don't know if you all are familiar with the Main Street Project, but it's worth checking out online. It's worth checking out what they're doing. Very biodynamic permaculture kind of finca. It's very much based on fincas and eco villages, and just done some phenomenal work. And these guys stepped up and helped him get it where he needs to go. And that's some pretty hard math for a lot of people to see, but I think all the people that have spoken too far see that kind of thing and think that kind of way. So thanks for being there. And Arno, I'd love to hear from you. I know you're seeing this from California. That's a lot different, but you're probably seeing a lot of the same things you see out there.
Yeah, greetings from San Francisco, Ohlone country. First of all, I'm so beautiful stories like from the farmers on this call, and I'm easily overwhelmed, obviously, by the wonderful work that you're doing, but it's like so far away from where I am. Like what comes to mind is like you're sharing basically about the babies that you have been growing, and it's like I feel easily overwhelmed when like young parents show me their baby pictures, right? The first one is cute, and then they come the baby pictures 2 to 11, and it says, "Oh, go away! This is too much for me," right? So the question is actually, besides talking about and showing each other our babies, actually, what do we actually do together, and how do we collaborate actually to face the challenges, actually to grow the kids, right? In this case, our farms. And so I'm involved with something that's called Slow Money. It takes it leans on slow food. Obviously, it's about very let's say charmingly disorganized community of food entrepreneurs, farmers, and funders and activists around it, where we see to challenge basically money out of Wall Street into local food systems, to grow local economies, starting with food and ag. And our impact focus is foremost now for the last few years on JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and on climate action. So what's the solution that also farming does towards climate? And in doing this work, and by the way, I'm personally a banking executive in recovery, and at some point woke up to the fact that I'm also a lifelong eater. And banking is not really doing anything about this. So I think what I would like to throw into the group before we get to like some of the solutions is actually a hypothesis that I hear quite often from people, is if you want to do food right, meaning treating the land right, the supply right with heritage, biodiversity, treat the farmers and everybody in the food workers right. Food done right is, in our current system, cannot be a really profitable endeavor. And that's why capitalist doesn't give much about it, because the field is so skewed by like how Farm Bill is challenging economic resources into the standard crops, and with all the regulation and fertilization, like food done right does have an unfair disadvantage, right? And that's just, I think, something we need to focus. So that's why we don't find traditional funders that go invest in other industry. We don't find them for food done right. So I'm involved also with folks around eco-farm, and we have a lot of conversations around this. So I think in terms of the solutions, some of them have come up, is what do you do actually in such a skewed environment? I think land trusts, I think Emily brought it up, that by the development easements of the lands, so that other investors cannot buy the land for more money because they have an attractive development project there. Absolute key. So where that is happening, you really should look at Bill's model. He just talked about what he does in terms of transitioning farmland from conventional approaches to fund the new generation, because that's come up in this call here. Like in Northern California, we have the same thing. I put this into a little comment. The farmers are aging, their kids don't want to take over, but there's an incredibly pool of talented, incredibly motivated people who want to take over, but they are not the kids, so they don't have the money. Often they're actually immigrants who have worked on the farmers for decades and are ready, and quite frankly, they're the best ones to take over, right? And so there are a number of organizations like Kitchen Table Advisors who help with approaches like this. California Farm Link, that's something we have out in our area. And I think the key is, whatever you do, I call it something line of sight funding, because the slow money is actually all about relationships. So what Emily said, you were like years nurturing a community around yourself, and then somebody from the community eventually stepped up and says, I'm a funder helping with a land purchase. So explore what was going on in that person's head and heart to make that move, and that comes through a community. So we have, for example, communities in Slow Money. We have like group loans. We have funded a pasture chicken farmer, and I took the interest payments actually in eggs. So that's no banker or like venture capitalists would ever do this. But if you're in community, if you can be a customer, you can do this. There are models of community prepay, where your customers not just CSA just pay like as they go. They can also pay you like 1 or 2 years in advance, so you can actually buy the livestock that you actually will need. There are interesting approaches also. We have something here, Growing the Table. It's a funded project that buys surplus from farmers for the seasonal changes that otherwise like is thrown away or donated, but they use it for school lunch programs, but they pay the farmers a fair price for the surplus, which is usually not happening. And these are like just some examples that we have seen to basically to help with the disadvantage, economic disadvantage that food done right has in the current form of capitalism. So just want to throw out a few things because I'm in Northern California. I rarely would like look at something in Missouri because that's where my line of sight gets a little bit thinner, right?
It's not about necessarily, like I said, when we started this, it's not about necessarily looking for a funding solution. You know, funding is such a horrible word in my opinion, because it's not. Greg made the comment yesterday in the thing. Funding is not investment. Funding is how all these resources come together to get there. And I think there's some truth to that, but I hate that we have to explain that. You know, I like it, resourcing, supporting, whatever it is. You know, these people are growing communities to grow the resources to grow or heal the ecology they need to do what they need to do. You know, they've made a shift from moving the economics from a pillar to the middle and made the ecology a pillar in the diagram, you know. And it's
one more thing that I wanted to bring up. Sorry, I didn't say that earlier. People in your community that live around you, they also get a different ROI that Wall Street would never look at. Yeah, you have healthier land. You're doing something about climate change with soil health. If you hire ex-convicts, you don't pay with your tax dollars when they basically go back into the system. You have healthier communities that like, these are all ROI components that like Wall Street would never like put any attention to, right? And that's why I think community line of sight is really where you have to look at to find to like nurture capital, sometimes what we call it, as opposed to venture capital.
Awesome. Thank you all. I want to give Katie a few minutes to wrap it up, number one, but you're going to hear me bloviate more later in the day, and I hope all of you can join. And those that just popped in, I know you're busy, but check out what you can at this conference. It's been absolutely wonderful throughout it. And yesterday was a very moving day. And so it's been today. And thank you for sharing. It's so good to see all your faces in the same place again. It's been too long. We need to go do that in Hartsburg. All right, Katie, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I think it'll be hard to do this justice with the synthesis in such a brief period of time. But, I think that what we just heard was very much the case for what we're all here to do. I think that, there's certainly, as Charlie mentioned, this is kind of, we were scheming for this to kind of be the setup for a session that we have later this afternoon that's presenting some more specific solutions. And so I won't go into that in its entirety now, but I will share that, to Dari's point earlier, something we've discovered certainly in our conversations with North Carolina Agricultural and Technical and their unique role of extension and supporting smallholder farmers as an example, is even if you're working with 15,000, it becomes really difficult at scale to start to reach the edges. If you're in California, like Arno, you might have, a certain line of sight near where you are, and there might be others that are implementing more bioregionally, contextually relevant solutions elsewhere, but there are so many common threads that unite us kind of structurally in terms of what's needed to really see one another and really get these projects resourced. And so what I will share is that our efforts thus far with Open Future Coalition have really been looking at first, what is the non-financial, sometimes I use the word capacity building, sometimes I hate that term too, because I think we all have a lot of capacity, we just need resources. But we've really been developing tools to help practitioners better see one another and to participate in some of that non-financial value exchange, some of that knowledge exchange, saying, this is what I'm seeing here, this is the challenge I'm having, what are you seeing? I think that this conversation is an example of that. We have a digital platform with the aim of connecting practitioners as well for some of that value exchange. And where that kind of connects into this conversation is that when we were having our many months of conversations with Mark at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical, what we found was while he is connected with so many practitioners, it starts to become a little bit difficult to reach those edges, the edges of the state. There start to be limitations of what you're able to reach from building to building or spreadsheet to spreadsheet. There are so many hundreds of millions in funds available through the USDA and NEFA to pass through institutions, land grant institutions in particular, that are available to fund some of these projects, if and only if they can record that they are meeting sort of the strategic objectives of the USDA. And that takes measurement, that takes reporting, that takes access to some of these anchor institutions to communicate that, to kind of unlock some of these lines of funding. And it often takes private funds to unlock federal and state funds, and communities that don't have access to that private funding, it kind of kicks off this vicious cycle of community divestment, because you end up, punitively having folks who don't have access to private wealth signing waivers to use their state funds to unlock their federal funds. And so I will say that seeing all of this, we've put our hat in the ring to offer whatever we can to help onboard as many institutions, as many practitioners as we can, to reflect the work that is already being done, the impact that is already being created, so that it may be made visible and measured and reported, so that we can start to adequately document and report to the right agencies these impacts, and then pull through some of this federal funding that's being left on the table year after year and resource these communities. And we're also working on models that allow us to bring in institutional private capital and invest directly in the capacity of small local lending institutions, so that we can provide 20, 30-year loans to some of these projects, even sort of recoverable ones with other mechanisms, to allow us to really meaningfully restore capacity to these communities by parking the capital back where it belongs. So we'll be doing a design charrette later this afternoon that explains exactly how we're aiming to support this. And I very much encourage and invite all of your participation in that session. That is called Convening a Center for Regeneration, from 12:30 to 2 p.m. Pacific this afternoon. But right after this session, if you want to stick on this same link, we're having a roundtable on food justice and community resilience. And then I'll also name that we're having a workshop on Regenerate America and the Farm Bill at 2 p.m. Pacific after the conversation around the center. So I know that based on parts of this conversation, various of those conversations will be relevant to you all. So I welcome you. Those are all at the same link. So if you popped in just for this session but want to stick around for any of those, I absolutely welcome it. And I look forward to rolling up our sleeves together later and getting designing. As well, in your invitation to the forum, you also received a link to create a profile on the Open Impact platform. We have set up a group and a project for kind of each day of the forum to provide some of that space for kind of knowledge skill exchange, so you can start to better connect with one another. And so we welcome and encourage you to use that space. We'll also be following up more explicitly after the forum with other opportunities to continue some of these conversations. So thank you all so very much, and thank you all for the work that you're doing.
Thank you all. feel free to stick around.